All right, this Shabbat we read Parshat Vayelech. And Parshat Vayelech has some very strange uh, predictions by God. And he says there's going to come a day when Hastir Astir, I will hide my face from the Jews. Bad news. I will hide my face from you. And they say this is where Esther, the Esther from the Torah, the holiday of Purim, which if you remember, the holiday of Purim was one of the low points of Judaism. Right? All of the Jews, they wanted to ingratiate themselves to Haman and Achashverosh. They went to the meal, all this, and they were like sitting high. The Jewish people were like maybe in the best place politically they'd ever been in the history of the world. The queen of the world was a Jewess. Esther was a queen of the world. And Mordecai was sitting on the gate of the king. And all of a sudden, one day, Haman said, I'm going to kill all the Jews, everyone in one day. And the Jews weren't even allowed to get any weapons to protect themselves. Something like what it is now, right? The United Nations, they wanted to have the Jews have no right to protect themselves. So but back then there was, nowadays they got America's with us, who knows what, but back then absolutely nobody was with us. The king of the whole world, Achashverosh, was against them. Everyone was against all the Jews. It says, Haster, God hid his face. Right, to kill all the Jews in one day. That's what Haman wanted, and everyone agreed. Everyone in the world were all sharpening up their swords and their whatever it is, waiting for that one big day, right? And it ended up that it was a big miracle and it transformed, and that's the whole, right? We have the holiday of Purim. Okay, but what does it say? Hastir Aster, I will hide my face in that day. Okay, so the Rebbe says everything that it says in the Torah has a positive message to us. And sometimes the things that are the lowest have the most positive messages. What could possibly be a positive message over here? It says when there is, God is with us, so we have some inspiration. But when it says, God says, I'll hide my face. So what does it mean, I will hide? Haster, aster. It means that God will be so concealed that we won't even know that he's concealed. Like we have now, like I told you, I saw a video, Jews for Hamas. Jews marching in, who knows how many of them are really Jews, but they're Jews for Hamas, right? Jews for Hamas. I mean, that's the most, the biggest, how do you say, it's like, a movement we're for suicide, pro-suicide, right? So you're for suicide, what do you want to do? Why are you even marching? Hamas wants to destroy you, wants to kill you, and Jews are for Hamas. So it's like, you don't even know how far away you are. You don't even know how distant you are from it. That's when you haster. The God is double hidden, says the Rebbe, but there must be some sort of a blessing in here. And we have to know what to do in order to receive it. So it says, is movement, it's understood, as the bracha is a grosser bioter, it must be a tremendously big blessing. This must be hinting at a tremendously big blessing, because the whole Torah is blessings. So if it comes out in such a terrible, awful way, so this must be some sort of a blessing. It's so big we can't get it. But therefore, therefore, it comes that is very concealed. Okay, so what is the blessing concealed in this terrible apparent curse? I will hide myself from you, says God. I will hide. You won't even have no chance. You won't have any chance of coming back to me. I will hide my face. You won't even know how lost you are. What type of a blessing, says the Rebbe? It must be a blessing. It must be a big blessing, because we can't see any sort of positive way to. And what can we do to get this blessing? Here we go. Vetman verstehen, we can understand by first of all understanding what the first Rebbe of Chabad said, and the sentence Ani Yeshane B'Libi Er. It's a sentence in prophecy in Shir HaShirim. I'm sorry, it's a sentence. It's in Song of Songs. I am asleep and my heart is awake. As in bechinas mamali kolmim, how God is that He fills the worlds was wird angerufen, which is called I am asleep. Is shaykh, it could be that I am asleep. How God fills the worlds, that's what God calls I, which is not the case. My heart, like a person, right? You see a person, that's the outside of the person. You say, this is who I am. What about a person's heart that you don't see? So it's the same thing by God. That which you see of God, that can be asleep, right? And we see what the world is. That everybody's against us, we're against ourselves, which is not the case. The inside of God, which is called Soviv Kolmim, that's the hidden part. That's my heart, is all no air. So God is saying, I am asleep, but my heart is awake. That's what King Solomon says in the Song of Songs. Read the Song of Songs, by the way, very interesting book. And like I've said so many times, you read it. If you think you understand it, you're wrong. The book is it's totally a metaphor between the Jewish people and God. The relationship, the love relationship between God and the Jewish people. When air the Alter Rebbe explains that God can be hidden as far as his outside, but the inside, Libi, my heart, is always awake. And the Alter Rebbe explains, as B'shas, as a Yid, when a Jew, Medabek Machshavto, when a Jew attaches his thoughts and the desires of the world, right? He wants fame, he wants pleasure, he wants security. When a person is when a person clings too much to the world, and he thinks that the world will provide him life, and he leaves the life of Atam Achayas Kulam, and he forgets that God is enlivening us, that God is the one that fills the worlds. When a Jew forgets about this, he's separated from the level of how God fills the world. He thinks he's independent, there's no God, which is not the case in Bechinas Soviv Kolmim, which is not the case how God fills the worlds, which not the case how God, surrounds the worlds. It's impossible in any way to separate from God. Vile, because the Reuta, the Liba, the arousal of the heart of every Jew to God, and also of God to us, was kommt from Bechinas Soviv Kolmim. This comes from what's called God's heart. Yeshno b'kol adam. There is in every person. King Solomon says, I am asleep. God says, I am asleep, but my heart is awake. And so it is with each one and every one of us. The external part of God, the I of God, is asleep to us. But the essence of God is awake, and so is our heart is awake to God. When option niralo, and even though it seems that God does not exist, and God does not feel anything, and that I don't feel anything also, it's a lie. Even though that because even though that a person does not see God, mazleo chazi, the essence, it's called as mazalda, his soul sees God. Okay, so what's going on over here? What does the Rebbe say? King Solomon said it first. Even though that I am asleep, says God, that I seem to be not awake, but my heart is awake to you. And so it is with every Jew. Even though a Jew does not see any connection whatsoever with reality to God. It doesn't say, who says you need such a thing? God, you don't see any connection whatsoever, but his heart, it knows it. His heart is awake to God. The Chiora at first glance is not understood. So in other words, externally you can be separated from God, but internally not. Says the Rebbe, this doesn't make any sense. How God fills all the worlds that we say you can be separated from. Because God, you're enlivening everything, is erdach, so it is mechaya oich adem shovek chayus shel va'ata mechayat kulam. 1 second, what does it mean? God hides himself. God is hidden from me, but God is enlivening me. If I exist, how do I exist? God isn't. And from this figure, therefore, Zoktim, we say that because a person is ratzach parnosas, because a person gets too interested in the world, he abandons the life of God. And he becomes separate from God because he separates the God who creates the worlds. He's separate from God, really? So if you're separate from God, you should disappear. How can you be separate from God? So what does the Rebbe say? Externally, we can be separate from God. We can separate from God. But internally, our heart, which that's the level of soul, the essence of God, it's always awake. Says the Rebbe, what do you mean be separate from God? Maybe you can be unconscious of God better. What do you mean, separate? The Rebbe, first Rebbe uses the word, we become separated from God. And the Rebbe said, but that doesn't make any sense. You can't really be separated from God. God, no matter what you do, God is always creating you. He's with you. So what does it mean separated? So for Vasasha, what is it? Zokman, why does it say regarding how God surrounds the worlds, right? The essence of God, God's heart, so to speak, as oibafilu niralo, even though it seems that God is not here, as EFSHL, you can't separate from God in any way. So what are we saying? The external of God, you can separate yourself, but the internal of God, you can't separate yourself. If you can separate yourself from God at all, so you're separate. What difference does it make if it's the outside or the inside? And on the other hand, how can you be separated from God? What does that mean? We have to say, as does that which regarding to the arousal of the heart, the inner heart of every Jew, Zoktem Alta Rebbe, the first Rebbe says, Yeshno b'kol it is found in every Jew, meant as nit, it doesn't mean only because of mazle, the essence of his soul. It's called mazel, the essence of the soul. Nor oich mitzad iu. It's also because of the person's feeling. So the Alter Rebbe says that you cannot leave the heart of God. It must mean that it doesn't mean that you cannot leave the heart of God because God is always there in some sort of a really hidden way. It means no, also you're feeling. So if so, but it says that you don't see it, but your mazel does see it. So if so, it seems that you are separated. So what's the Rebbe saying over here? A Jew does a sin. A Jew doesn't believe God exists. He is certain that God does not exist. He wants absolutely nothing to do with the whole idea. The people that believe it are a bunch of insane people. They're just limiting their life for absolutely no reason. He wants absolutely nothing to do with God. That was the Israeli ideal. They were going to make a place that was going to be totally free of the superstitions of God and everything like that. So the superstition. So the Rebbe says, okay, you can separate yourself as much as you want to, but you're never going to be separated from God. The essence of your soul is always attached to God. So the Rebbe says, doesn't make any sense. What do you mean you can separate yourself from God? God is creating you. Whether you want it or not, that doesn't make any difference. The fact is that you're not separated. And if you can be separated, so what does it mean that only the external, but the internal is never separated? So what does it mean it's never separated? How can it possibly be it's never separated? If it's never separated, you have to be able to feel it somehow or other. You must be feeling it. So if you're feeling that, then why can't you feel the external also? It doesn't make any sense. Basically, what the Rebbe is saying is, if a Jew can be separate from God, you should be able to be separate totally. And if you can't be separated from God internally, then you can't be separated at all. What difference is what you think? Like a person that thinks that he's a dog. So you think you're a dog. You can think whatever you want to, but you're still not separated from your true identity. You're a man. Like I heard the Rabbi Sofer say, says they put you in a mental institution for people, not for dogs. You're a human being. The same thing, a Jew, his essence is God. It doesn't make any difference what he thinks, what he feels. So he can't be separate. On the other hand, the first Rebbe of Chabad says that he is separate. He's separate. The external part, you're separated from God, separated, and the internal part, not. How can it be? Says the Rebbe, the explanation is like this. Bechinas Mamali calling that how God fills the worlds, the external, so to speak, aspect of God. Vipal, because as it is Mamali, because it fills and enlivens all the worlds. its whole thing as the almost of the worlds, they can understand how God is enlivening them. Right? You can think to yourself, what's keeping me alive? It must be some power. It's coming from somewhere. So it's possible to come to a conclusion that maybe there's a creator. Maybe can feel it. And therefore, a person can show that he can leave. Nit masi, he cannot grasp a zayin chayas that his life comes from God. Hastas, it means as the or eloki, that the light of godliness gefinzich bayim is in a way of helam b'sobib. True, he's alive, but he says, I'm alive because of nature. Alive, it's nature. It's like I'm just made of, somehow or other, how do you call it? The inanimate, what do they call it? I can't remember the word. There's organic chemistry, inorganic. All these inorganic atoms somehow or other popped to be organic, and I have intelligence and other, right? So it comes out as there was a shovik that the person abandons the life of God. So it comes out that he becomes separated from Mamalik Homi. What does it mean he becomes separated? And that he doesn't want anything to do with any creation. He's just doesn't think about it. It's not him. It's like a person puts $1 million in your bank account and you want to be a poor person. You want to go and you rummage in the garbage and you like it, right? You want to rummage and sleep out in the street in the nighttime, and right? If you be all dirty and red, you just like it. But you're a multimillionaire, you have it in the bank. But you've separated yourself from it. You've separated yourself. So therefore, it's as though it's not there. The same thing with God creating the world. You've separated yourself from the creator. So everything is like accidental and everything is just, good luck. But there's no godliness involved. There's no miracles. There's no, right? Nothing to be thankful for, that I'm alive, that I'm healthy. So therefore, you have separated yourself, which is not the case, the level of Soviet calling. This is above. This is above all the worlds. And because of that, that a person is found in the world is not because it has a connection to him, but because mitzad im, because who he is. Heyos vas is beligavul. I'm sorry, what God is, because God is unlimited, is there faran umatom, so God is everywhere. When al derech, by means of this, ruta the liba, the arousal of the heart, which is taken, that's soviv nefesh. Surrounding aspect of the soul. Let me say it how I understand this. Right? There's a lot of people that they say that God didn't create the world. The world came from a big bang. The world came from a black hole. The world came from all sorts of different ways it came. Or there's some people that say, as far as I understand, that was what Greek philosophy was. The world just was always here. It's just it's a not question. It's just the world was just always here. So we don't understand. It was always here. Okay, whatever you want to say, good. So that you can say, and then things evolved. One thing evolved from another thing, evolved from another thing. Good. So that you can maybe ask questions about. Maybe you can say this, theory of Darwin's whole idea. Okay, could be. Right, could be. Yeah, there's a lot of big scientists believe it. But the question is another question. How does everything exist now? What is existence? Forget about the difference between a frog and a person and inanimate and inorganic and organic. Forget about all that. What is existence? How do things exist? How do they exist? What brings things into existence? Right? Okay, the world always existed. Good, always existed. It came from a black hole. Where did the black hole come from? Not where did it come from then? Where does it come from now? Me and you. How do we exist now? That's like the essence of God. That's everywhere. Existence in the spiritual worlds and the physical worlds. That a Jew can never separate himself from. But it's not practical. It's not practical whatsoever. Right? You don't see any miracles. It's like the world is just, everything is equal. Everything is the same. It's just existence. It says that aspect you can never leave. That aspect. Now, by a non-Jew, he said, you could say, well, I'm not asking that question. By a Jew, it bothers him. If he thinks about it, it bothers him. The other things don't bother him. We had the 6-Day War, for instance. big miracles. What did the Israeli government say? It wasn't miracles. There was not miracles. It was our pilots, and it's true there were pilots, and true they were very accurate, and true they were really inspired, and it was big luck, and then our enemy got confused. Well, whatever you can say, right? But how does everything exist? Where does the existence of everything come from? Either you have to ignore it totally, or you have to deal with it and admit you don't understand, because it's impossible to understand. That's what's called Soviv Kolmim, how God surrounds. By a non-Jew, it's not that important. By a Jew, it's very important. By a Jew, it's a very, very important thing. It's not just a take it or leave it philosophical idea. Is there a basis for existence? Is there a creator? That's what's called Soviv Kolmim, and this can never be hidden from a Jew. Is nitshayach, it's not relevant as the header asagada because you don't understand it. This doesn't cause any change in not God's reality and not in your reality. This is what's called the arousal of the heart. This could be even a totally anti-religious Jew. He wakes up, I'm a Jew, God is the creator. How he creates, what he does, when he does, that's Abraham. That's Abraham. God did all sorts of terrible things to Abraham, 10 tests. He says, I don't care, God, you're the creator, I'm nothing. I do what you want. Uvi Zainen Faran in Zer Gilui, Oich Dort Vu Men is Ze Nit Margish. No matter where God reveals his essence, you can't feel it. You can't feel that reality comes from God. It doesn't make any sense. How can it doesn't make any sense? That God is creating everything individually and all the changes, that sort of makes sense. There's so many blades of grass. How can it possibly be? Either it's nature, but if God's creating it, that's really amazing, right? But that existence is here. There was always existence. You can't say the difference between existence and non-existence. Well, you can't compare it. So this is something, the essence of God, the essence of reality. That's why a lot of rabbis say, right, Chabad especially, that Judaism is not a religion. Because reality is not a religion. Reality. And therefore, Zokter in Maimer it says, Avshen Niralo, even though it seems to him that in Niralo She'en Lo, even though it seems that God, there's no creator, and he doesn't feel it. But this is certainly a big lie. Certainly a lie. A Jew, for certain, he feels the essence of God. As Dusvas Niralo She'en Lo, the Eno Margish, that what it seems, that I'm not connected to God and I don't feel it, this is a lie. Why? Because the Re'uta de Liba, the arousal of the heart of every Jew, was Yeder Yid, which every Jew is Mazle Chazer, the essence of his soul feels it. Gefinzich, this is found also in revealed powers. As them, or that place was Niralo, it says he doesn't feel it. Right? It seems to him that God doesn't exist, right? Because I don't feel it. Of course you don't feel it, because it's the essence of God. You can't feel it. But on the other hand, you know that it's there. It's essence. I just saw recently, and I've seen this a lot, especially in Israel, it's happening. There's a lot of Jews nowadays in Israel that they were totally anti. It was the Zionist ideal, the ideal Zionist. I mean, Zionism is a tremendously leftist the movement. You know, the individual is free and there's no God and you do whatever you want to. And there's more and more Israelis now that they're starting to realize that God really does exist. And there's many of them. I've seen them. I'm not a religious Jew. I'm not religious. I put on tefillin every day. I keep kosher, but I am not religious. I know Haredi. I'm not religious, right? So some of I even keep Shabbat. I keep Shabbat, but I'm not religious. I'm not a religious Jew. Well, you're not religious. What do you do it for? What do you do it? It's just reality. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. That's the inner heart of the Jew. Es fadert sich nach aber bir, but this also, it has to be explained. What has to be explained? So that's what the Rebbe is saying. Every Jew feels the essence of God, the creator, without any details. Every Jew knows that it's so. Haint farvos, if so, how can it be? Now we're getting back to what it says. I will hidden that day. Not too far. Haint farvos zokman. Why do we say as dus was niralo she'en lo eno margish harizeu b'vada sheker? That what a person, what a Jew says, that I do not know God and I don't feel God. and God doesn't exist, and that's what a Jew is certain of that, it's a lie. Why does the Rebbe say it's a lie? We just finished saying that the external part of God, it's very, very possible that you don't feel it and you don't know it. That's the way God created the world. He wants us to be able to, like we said in Chassidut, to turn our backs on him. So it says the Rebbe, we can turn our backs on what's called the external of God, but not the internal of God. Okay, but we can't turn our backs to the external. Why is it a lie? Is there beer? The explanation is, like we said before, as tzimtzum hatamayla ofen or was therefore, which therefore can im mitzamtzim zich. Okay, we have to understand a little bit of a Kabbalistic idea, which I'm going to explain in, God willing, less than 1 minute. And the idea is like this, that before God created the world, there was no before. There was no such thing as before. Time began when God created the world. How did God make from infinite, undivided reality, the creator, which we have absolutely no idea what that means? How did God make a world? How did he do it? How did he take from infinite one nothingness and make a world from it? Right? It's like taking a blank piece of paper and saying, now watch how this paper is going to write an essay on itself. Right? That makes no sense. You have to have something else. How did God do it? So it says that God has in his essence what's called 10 aspects. And one of these aspects is severity. And God made it possible that he could hide his light. And he really did not hide his light. He just hid the visibility of his light. Okay, whatever this means, but we're talking about real super reality. And we're talking about the creator. And that the creator made this process in his, what's called his light, his creative force to reveal it, because it was hidden in God's ultimate infinite light. So God made this thing called the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum means that God has the ability to articulate himself. The tzimtzum has something better than God's light. Now you might think God hiding himself, that's not good, because God is the ultimate good. God is pure good. God is pure life, pure existence, right? Pure harmony, pure health, pure everything good. And God hiding over himself, tzimtzum, that's bad. Says the Rebbe, right? But there's a good thing about it. What's the good thing? Because therefore, this tzimtzum is that God can, thus, gufa, this fact, which God can make himself appear that he's not there. God can make it appear as though he isn't. This nemt sich das, it comes from beginners, from a level, was is noch hecher, from even higher than the level of sheyeshnu b'kol adam, what is found in every person. God's revelation is amazing, God's revelation, but God's ability to conceal himself comes from a higher source. Kum toisa comes out as there near lo she'en lo, that what it seems to a person that God does not exist is them zet zich gilui. You can see a revelation of God's ability to hide himself. This is a level which is even higher from Soviv. What do we say? That God exists and all existence comes from God. And this we can't feel because there's nothing to compare it to. But the fact that God makes everything exist, this comes from God's essence, that God somehow or other managed to conceal himself in order to create existence. So this ability of God to conceal himself, that's what we see in the exile. Nit einmal Hester. This is not just the God has hid himself once, but Hester Esther 2 times. God hides himself one time in order to make what's called Soviv Kolmim, to make pure existence. And God hides himself another time to articulate this existence. And so it's a double miracle. Hide, haster, haster. So therefore, when it comes down to Niralo, it seems to me that God doesn't exist. And in fact, God is everywhere and God is creating everything. Why don't I see it? Because this comes their mensch on faradavar ha-ma'alim. So all we can, because we're perceiving something that conceals God. as lakent air der mid. Therefore, you are, so to speak, touching that oich in der siba, the cause, the tokif, and the power of niralo, what seems to me that God doesn't exist. This itself, you're coming from hepech, the opposite, vi das is mitzad in yani gufo. You see what you it seems to be that God is concealed, but what I'm really seeing is God's infinite ability to conceal himself. And that comes from a higher source. It's something like in the Ten Commandments, that the first of the Ten Commandments is, I am God that took you out of Egypt. You might think, what type of a God is that? Egypt is a big accomplishment for him, that God can take us out of Egypt. God creates the whole world. He says, no, the fact that God has an ability to hide himself to a degree that there can be such a thing as Egypt. And not only that, that Egypt controls the Jews. This is showing how God hides, double hides himself. And that power of God to hide himself comes from a tremendously high place. And it's God's purpose, so to speak. And therefore, Zokta, the Alter Rebbe says that this itself, niralo, she'enlo, it says that it seems that God does not exist. This certainly is a lie, because what you're seeing is God's ability to conceal himself. And that comes from even a higher source than even the creation itself. It's the reason for creation. Okay, so what you see what the Rebbe is doing over here? He's saying like this: the fact that the world is created and it's a big miracle, that sort of is understandable, that it's godliness. I can't create a tree. I can't create a rock. You see, everything is different from everybody else, and everything is alive. See, there's a big difference between life and death. You start to think, where does life come from? Life is so good. Where does it come from? You start to understand God. But the fact that everything exists, you can't understand that. You can't understand that everything exists. That's so difficult. But every Jew is sure that it comes from God. Every Jew is sure. Maybe you're sure in a deep down way, but you're sure. But the fact that God can conceal himself to a degree that he makes Soviv Kolmim and Mamali Kolmim, that God makes a thing called creation, and that's one thing, and that the creation articulates itself. That's Mamali Kolmim, how it fills the world. That's another thing. So that comes from a higher source, from even God's oneness, God's ability to make a division. Und das ist euch der Bir. That's the explanation of the blessing. We say, Anochi haster haster. That's what God says. I will hide, in this restore portion, I will conceal my face on that day. Euch der haster haster. Even that concealment comes from Anochi, from God's essence. Anochi, higher than I, Ani. That's Anochi. That's the first word of the Ten Commandments. The ability of God to conceal himself and make this world a exile, and we Jews are here in order to transform it, to reveal the essence of God. That's a big miracle. That's a higher miracle than even God's creating the world. It's the reason why God hides himself. Und because of Zoe, it's so, is doch nid blois. It's not just which God is concealing over. God is not concealing over godliness. It's not a concealment, nor adrab, exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. When a person, mitbonen, contemplates, thinks in that, vi areas lamitoto, how it really is verter gor durachim nitkale asach hecher, a higher thing, which even revelation. So it's something like, what is Judaism based on? There's a man called Abraham, and God gave Abraham 10 tests. What does it mean, 10 tests? That God concealed himself from Abraham 10 times. He told Abraham, do this, and I'm going to give you this. And Abraham did what God said, and God didn't come across. And God said, because I love you, what you've done, you're going to get the land of Israel, and your children are going to be like the stars of heaven. And Abraham didn't get it. It was so self-sacrifice every moment of his life, and he didn't get any rewards whatsoever, Abraham. And his son Yitzchak, same thing. Right? They didn't get the land of Israel. Their children were like the stars of the heaven. The same thing with Jacob, the same thing with Joseph, the same thing with Moses. Right? Even Moses, he didn't get the land of Israel. To this very day, we haven't really gotten the land of Israel. This very day, right? All of the Jews means all of the Jews, even those from the raising of the dead. It says, then the Jews will be like the stars in the heavens and that. So why did God conceal himself from all this time? Why? Says the Rebbe, the concealment comes from such a tremendously high place that when we look at it, we can't possibly see any godliness. It's a double concealment. That comes from the essence of God. That's what made Abraham, that Abraham saw through it. He saw through that the concealment is not really a concealment of God. That's the 10 tests that he had. So God forbid when something bad, I mean, nobody wants bad things to happen. We're not saying that, oh, bad things are good. That's good. Bad things are terrible. And Moshiach is going to come. There's not going to be any bad things. There's going to be health. There's going to be happiness. The whole world. There won't be any wars. But while there is, says the Rebbe, that this is the connection to the sentence which says, Anochi haster aster, I will conceal my face, to the 10 days of tshuva, which this is talking about, and all which we read all the time, right after Rosh Hashanah, the first day from the 10 days of tshuva. That's the whole idea of haster aster, that God says, I will conceal my face. This does not oppose holiness. Exactly the opposite. Davkin them by means of this, by means of realizing that the concealment of God, this is really the essence of God. And by means of this, we can eventually see through all of this concealment and reveal the Anochi, the essence of God in the world. Why God made all his concealment in the world. Why? Thus, this will be revealed only through the service of tshuva, by the Jews returning their consciousness back to the Creator and saying everything that's happening in the world should not in any way make me lose my enthusiasm to make this world a dwelling place for God, to transform all of this darkness to light. Because tshuva brings about that even the purposeful sins that we do, because of God's concealment, they will be transformed to merits. And we'll see that the reason we did sins was because God concealed himself and we misinterpreted it. And then we start interpreting it properly, as then the true reason for the whole entire creation will be revealed in a good way, in a revealed way, in a happy way, in a blessed way with Moshiach now.
Amen.
Okay, now let us do the Yom Yom. 1 second.